These healthcare workers in Pretoria are protesting against a lack of personal protective gear and low salaries. With almost 640,000 cases, South Africa is battling Africa's worst COVID-19 outbreak. That's straining hospitals, and medical staff are threatening to go on strike unless their working conditions improve.
We can no longer keep quiet anymore while healthcare workers are dying in various facilities because of COVID-19. We are saying we can no longer keep quiet while our healthcare workers are getting infections at the facilities because the employer is unable to provide adequate PPE in the facilities. We are saying enough is enough.
Demonstrations began after an investigation revealed millions of dollars meant for the country's COVID-19 relief efforts were misappropriated. The government's promising to crack down on corruption, but it's strapped for cash, so meeting the workers' demands may be difficult. South Africa's GDP contracted 51% in the second quarter compared to the previous 3-month period, extending the country's longest recession in 28 years. The government has already received an emergency loan of $4.3 billion from the IMF. The government has already received an emergency loan of $4.3 billion from the IMF this year, and a $29.6 billion stimulus package announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa in July is expected to raise national debt to 82% of GDP. But that package does not include wage hikes for healthcare workers and laborers in other industries like mining, which shrank by 75% between April and June compared to the first quarter. And government officials say the fight against COVID-19 is limiting their ability to manage other healthcare challenges.
Coverage, it has become very clear in our response to COVID-19 that if we are not vigilant, we may lose the gains that we have already obtained from the fight on tuberculosis, fight against HIV, and even some of the basic essential services such as immunization and reproductive health, and it becomes very...
The government needs more money to help the most vulnerable communities through the pandemic. But with workers threatening to strike in key industries, an increase in revenues appears unlikely, and that could mean more economic pain for millions of South Africans. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, Thea Fourie joins me live from Johannesburg. She's Africa Markets analyst at IHS Markit. Thea, great to have you on the program with us. Is the strict coronavirus lockdown that we saw in South Africa that went into effect in March solely responsible for this steep decline that we're seeing?
Yes, of course, it has been a key contributor to this massive slump in GDP we've seen in the second quarter. But even before the second quarter, South Africa's GDP growth has been trending down on a year-on-year basis and even on a quarter-on-quarter basis. So in the first quarter of this year, we've even before the pre-lockdown measures, we've already seen the GDP growth slumping. And a lot of this was contributed to the electricity supply deficits we have in the South African economy, resulting in measures where electricity supply is limited and you have a lot of electricity disruptions.
Mm-hmm. South Africa is Africa's most developed economy. What kind of ripple effect do you think we could see across the continent?
Of course, South Africa is the second largest country in the sub-Saharan African region. So this slump in GDP growth will ultimately mean that the overall GDP growth expectations for the sub-Saharan African region will come down in the second quarter. But South Africa is also a key exporting partner for many countries, especially in the SADC region. And the supply side disruptions that we've seen in the second quarter will have a ripple effect to some of its major exporting partners, particularly countries such as Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the coronavirus pandemic is still a very big concern. South Africa has the 7th highest number of coronavirus cases globally. Can its economy afford another possible shutdown or other measures to try to contain the virus?
Well, I think it's very clear from the second quarter GDP growth numbers that it will be very difficult to implement these type of lockdown measures once again, given the severe impact this will have on the economy. Although we have very high coronavirus numbers, it seems like South Africa has reached its peak and coronavirus numbers has actually started to come down the past month. Very slowly but surely. Of course, we do have to brace ourselves for the possibility of a second wave of COVID-19 cases following the slump in COVID cases we're seeing currently. But for now, it seems like we have reached the peak, and hopefully we can avoid a severe second wave. But of course, it remains a concern for growth prospects going forward.
Mm-hmm. A bit of good news there, but do you think it's possible for South Africa's economy to rebound? I mean, how much of a challenge is this going to be?
No, it's going to be a massive challenge. And I think the biggest problem is even before we went into this lockdown measure, South Africa's unemployment level was already at about 30%. And there's some sectors that definitely will find it very difficult to bounce back, particularly the tourism sector. South Africa is a huge tourism destination, and our small and medium-sized enterprises. Due to this high unemployment rate, we also have a very large informal sector. And this sector, of course, has been severely impacted by the lockdown measures and will not be able to weather such an impact once again. So it will be very difficult for the economy to weather any severe lockdown measures like we've seen during the second quarter once again.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thea Fourie in Johannesburg. Thank you, Thea.